The massive fleet hung in the darkness of space like a monument to terror itself. 300 warships from the Galactic Hegemony Council stretched across the border of human territory, each vessel larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ships were not just machines of war, they were designed to break the spirit of any species that saw them. Grand Admiral Zixthara stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 eyes scanned the view screens with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to the standard protocol that had worked for 50,000 years. The protocol was simple. Show overwhelming force, demonstrate past victories, and watch the new species crumble before a single shot was fired. The hulls of the hegemony ships were decorated with the bones and skulls of defeated species. Massive banners, made from the flags of conquered worlds, hung between the weapons arrays. Each ship broadcast on specific frequencies, transmitting the recorded final screams and pleas for mercy from hundreds of civilizations that no longer existed. It was psychological warfare perfected over millennia. "The human diplomatic vessel is approaching," reported his second officer, a thin Vexalian, whose skin changed colors with emotion. Currently, it showed the confident purple of anticipated victory. Zixthara allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They had spread across a mere 30 systems, building modest colonies and trade routes. Their technology was adequate, but unremarkable. Their military consisted of patrol ships and defensive platforms, nothing that could challenge even a single hegemony dreadnought. The human diplomatic ship was tiny compared to the surrounding armada. It looked like a small fish swimming toward a school of predators. The vessel was clean and functional, with none of the elaborate decorations or intimidation displays that most species adopted once they reached space. It simply existed, plain and almost boring in its efficiency. "Open a channel," Zixthara commanded. "Let us begin the ritual of submission." The view screen shifted to show the interior of the human ship. A man in a simple military uniform appeared. He had dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything without reaction. His name, according to the intelligence reports, was Captain Park Minjun, a mid-level diplomat and military officer. "Captain Park," Zixthara began, his voice resonating with the deep authority that made most species tremble. "You stand before the assembled might of the Galactic Hegemony Council. We represent 4,000 species and control 70,000 worlds. You will observe what awaits those who refuse to join us." With a gesture, Zixthara activated the holographic display system. Images filled the space between the ships, massive 3-dimensional recordings that showed world after world falling to hegemony forces. Cities burning, populations fleeing, leaders kneeling in surrender. The recordings were carefully selected for maximum psychological impact. They showed species begging for their children to be spared. They showed proud warrior races, throwing down their weapons in despair. They showed the moment when hope died in the eyes of those who realized they could not win. Zixthara watched Captain Park's face carefully. This was the moment when most species broke. Their representatives would begin to shake, to sweat, to show the physical signs of overwhelming fear. Some would cry. Some would try to maintain dignity, while their bodies betrayed their terror. All would understand that resistance was futile. But Captain Park's expression was strange. His lips pressed together tightly, as if he was trying to hold something in. His shoulders seemed to shake slightly. Was this a human fear response? The intelligence reports had been unclear about human physical reactions to stress. "You see before you the fate of defiance," Zixthara continued, warming to his speech. He had delivered variations of this message hundreds of times. The hegemony offers a choice. Submit peacefully. Accept our guidance and protection, and your species will be allowed to continue. Refuse, and you will join the ash of history. Your worlds will be examples for the next species that considers resistance. Captain Park raised one hand to his mouth, coughing slightly. His face was turning red. "Yes," This must be fear. The human was trying to maintain composure, while his body betrayed his terror. We have destroyed species with technology far beyond yours, Zixthara pressed on. We have broken empires that ruled for 10,000 years before your species learned to make fire. We have turned the homeworlds of defiant races into lifeless rocks that serve as navigation warnings for others. What makes you think humanity could succeed where so many others have failed? The recordings shifted to show the skull decorations on the hegemony ships in detail. Each skull was from a species that had refused to submit. They were preserved and displayed as permanent reminders of the cost of defiance. The camera zoomed in on specific examples, showing the diversity of life that had been extinguished. Captain Park's shoulders were definitely shaking now. He seemed to be having trouble breathing. His face was very red, and his eyes were watering. "I must," Park said, his voice strained. "I must request a recess to consult with Earth. This is a significant decision that requires input from my government." Perfect, Zixthara thought. The human could barely speak from fear. He was buying time, hoping desperately that somehow his leaders would find a way out of this impossible situation. They never did. "You have 12 of your Earth hours," Zixthara declared magnanimously. "We will await your response here. Observe our fleet well, Captain Park. Count our ships. Study our weapons. Understand that what you see is merely a fraction of our power. Then return with your answer." The communication ended. Captain Park's image disappeared from the view screen. Zixthara turned to his officers, satisfaction evident in his posture. "Another species learns its place in the galaxy. Begin the next phase. I want all ships to activate their full intimidation arrays. Let the humans see what awaits them in every direction they look. When their captain returns, he will bring unconditional surrender." The bridge crew moved efficiently to carry out his orders. Across the Armada, more weapon systems powered up for display. More recordings of defeated enemies began broadcasting. More ships moved into formation to create an inescapable wall of military might. What Zixthara did not know was that aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Captain Park Min-jun had finally allowed himself to do what he had been desperately holding back during the entire communication. He burst into laughter so hard that tears ran down his face. Captain Park Min-jun tried to compose himself. But every time he looked at the recordings his crew had made of the hegemony fleet, he started laughing again. Around him, the rest of the diplomatic vessel's crew were having similar problems. "Sir," said Lieutenant Chen, wiping tears from her eyes, "we need to send our report to Earth Command. But I cannot stop watching this. Did you see the skeleton decorations? They look like they bought them from a discount Halloween store." Park nodded, taking deep breaths to calm himself. I know. But we have to be professional about this. They are clearly serious. Even if they look ridiculous to us." He opened a secure channel to Earth. Within minutes, the faces of several high-ranking military officials and government leaders appeared on his screen. Park delivered his report as professionally as he could manage, describing the hegemony fleet, their demands, and their intimidation display. There was a long silence after he finished. Then, from Earth, someone started giggling. Within seconds, the entire command center on Earth had erupted into laughter. "I am sorry, Captain Park," said Admiral Kim, trying to control herself. "But did they really think the skulls would scare us? Do they not understand human culture at all?" "Apparently not, Admiral," Park replied. "They seemed very proud of their display. I think it genuinely works on other species." "Of course it does," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the xenopsychology expert who had joined the call. "Most species that reach space travel did so through cooperation and collective effort. They tend to be naturally more cautious, more community-focused. The idea of death, especially violent death, carries significant psychological weight for them." She pulled up some data on her screen. "Humans are unusual. We are one of the few apex predator species to achieve spaceflight. We evolved hunting and being hunted. Death is familiar to us. We have spent our entire cultural history making art about it, telling stories about it, and yes, even making entertainment about it. So their intimidation display hits our cultural blind spot, Park said. Worse than that, Martinez continued. It hits what we find amusing. The trying to be scary aesthetic is something we have developed entire entertainment industries around. Horror movies, Halloween, haunted houses, scary stories around campfires. We actively seek out controlled fear experiences for fun. Reason. On Earth, more human ships were being prepared to join Park's vessel. The response fleet was not a military armada. It was a standard diplomatic and observation force, designed to study the hegemony and establish communication protocols. Nobody on Earth actually believed the hegemony would attack. If they wanted to destroy humanity, they would have done so already, not wasted time with elaborate theatrical displays. The human ships began arriving at the border over the next few hours. Each one that arrived had crew members who immediately started taking pictures of the hegemony fleet. The images spread across human communication networks rapidly. On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Admiral Zixthara was becoming increasingly confused and disturbed. His intelligence officers had intercepted human communications, and what they found made no sense. Admiral, his communication specialist reported, her voice uncertain. The humans are broadcasting on open channels. They are not encrypted military communications. They appear to be social exchanges. Show me. Zixthara commanded, the main screen filled with intercepted human transmissions. Zixthara watched in growing bewilderment as human crew members shared images of his fleet with captions like, "Best haunted house setup ever. And these guys take Halloween really seriously." There were comparisons to something called theme park decorations, and references to trying too hard to be edgy. One particularly popular image showed a close-up of the skull decorations on a hegemony dreadnought with a human text overlay reading, "When you order your intimidating space fleet from the discount store, what is Halloween?" Zixthara demanded. His xenocultural advisor, a Peltharian scholar who had studied dozens of species, pulled up information on human culture. What he found only deepened the confusion. "Admiral, Halloween is a human cultural celebration where they voluntarily dress up as frightening creatures and decorate their environments with death imagery for entertainment purposes. It appears to be primarily aimed at their children as a fun activity." Zixthara felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service: complete bewilderment. They make their children celebrate death symbols? As entertainment? It appears so, Admiral. They also have something called haunted houses, where they pay currency to have other humans jump out and try to frighten them in controlled environments. They consider this enjoyable recreation. Another officer spoke up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission request from Captain Park. He says he is ready to deliver humanity's response." Zixthara straightened himself, pushing away the confusion. Perhaps the humans were using humor as a coping mechanism for their fear. He had seen that before in some species. They would laugh or make jokes to hide their terror. "Yes, that must be it. Open the channel," he commanded. Captain Park appeared again. And this time, his composure was better. He looked professional and diplomatic, though there was still a strange lightness in his expression. "Grand Admiral Zixthara," Park began formally, "I have consulted with Earth, and we have prepared our response to your ultimatum. However, before I deliver it, I have been asked to seek clarification on a cultural matter." "Speak," Zixthara said. "Your fleet displays are very elaborate and clearly required significant effort and planning. We want to make sure we understand their intent correctly. Are they meant to be frightening?" The question was so unexpected that Zixthara did not know how to respond for a moment. "Of course they are meant to be frightening. They display the fate of all who oppose the hegemony." Park nodded slowly. "I see. Grand Admiral, I need to inform you of a cultural difference that may be causing some confusion. Humans have a different psychological response to death imagery and intimidation displays than you may be expecting. He gestured, and images appeared on the shared screen. They showed human children dressed in skeleton costumes, smiling and carrying bags of candy. They showed elaborate decorations of fake graveyards in front of human homes. They showed people laughing as they walked through dark buildings where actors jumped out to scare them. "This is Halloween," Park explained gently. "One of our major cultural celebrations. We decorate with skulls and death imagery as entertainment. We actively seek out experiences designed to frighten us because we find them enjoyable when we know they are not real threats." More images appeared. These showed human horror movies, with titles like Alien Invasion and Space Monsters. They showed book covers for scary stories. They showed theme park attractions with elaborate monster displays. We have entire industries dedicated to creating scary imagery for entertainment purposes, Park continued. Our psychological response to things that look scary but are not actually dangerous is not fear. It is pattern recognition that tells us the threat is not real, which often results in amusement. Zixthara stared at the images, his mind struggling to process this information. "You are saying that our fleet displays, perfected over 50,000 years, appear to you as entertainment?" Park's expression became sympathetic. "I am saying that they hit a very specific cultural blind spot for humans. We recognize them as trying to be frightening, but that recognition itself tells us they are not actually dangerous. Dangerous things do not waste time trying to look scary. They simply act." Around the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, officers exchanged confused looks. Their ultimate weapon, the intimidation protocol that had brought countless species to submission without firing a shot, was useless against these strange predator descendants, who had turned fear itself into entertainment. Grand Admiral Zixthara felt something dangerous rising inside him. It was not fear or confusion anymore. It was anger, mixed with humiliation. His perfect protocol, the method that had brought thousands of species to their knees, was being treated as a joke by these primitive humans. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the bridge. "If they do not fear our symbols, they will fear our power. Activate all weapon systems. We will demonstrate what real force looks like." Across the hegemony fleet, massive weapons came online. Planetary siege cannons that could crack the crust of a world emerged from hidden bays. Antimatter torpedo tubes opened, revealing warheads that could destroy entire fleets. Quantum destabilizers charged up, weapons so powerful they could tear apart the fabric of space itself. "Target the uninhabited moon in this system," Zixthara commanded. "Let the humans see what awaits their worlds if they continue to mock us." The hegemony fleet fired as one. The moon that had orbited peacefully for billions of years simply ceased to exist. The siege cannons shattered it into dust. The antimatter warheads consumed the fragments. The quantum destabilizers erased what remained, leaving nothing but empty space where a celestial body had been. "Again," Zixthara ordered. "Target the asteroids in the belt." More demonstrations of power followed. Each one was carefully calculated to show a different aspect of hegemony military technology. The weapons could destroy, disintegrate, or completely erase targets from existence. It was a display of such overwhelming force that most species would immediately begin surrender negotiations. On the human ships, the reaction was not what Zixthara expected. "Did you see the containment field configuration on that antimatter warhead?" One human engineer was broadcasting on an open channel. "The magnetic bottle design is actually more efficient than our current models. Focus on the quantum destabilizer," another voice replied excitedly. "They are using a cascade effect to multiply the dimensional tier. I need to get this data to the physics department at New Cambridge." "Recording everything?" a third human confirmed. "This is better than any weapons demonstration our own military has ever done. We are getting complete operational data on every system they are using." Zixthara listened to these transmissions with growing disbelief. The humans were not terrified. They were excited. They were studying the weapons like students at an academy, analyzing the technology with professional interest rather than existential dread. "Explain this," he demanded of his xenocultural advisor. The Peltharian scholar was reviewing human cultural data frantically. "Admiral, it appears that humans have a strong cultural tendency toward what they call reverse engineering and problem solving. Their entire technological advancement has been based on seeing something complex and figuring out how it works. That is how all species develop technology," Zixthara said impatiently. "Yes, but humans take it further. They view impressive technology not as proof of their inferiority, but as a challenge to understand and eventually overcome. Their entire space program was reverse engineered from theoretical physics. They built their first faster-than-light drive by studying natural phenomena and working backward to understand the principles." Another officer added a troubling detail. "Admiral, we are receiving formal requests from 3 human research stations. They are asking if they can examine any unexploded hegemony ordnance for academic purposes. They want to study our weapons?" Zixthara could not believe what he was hearing. "It appears so." One message says, and I quote, "The antimatter containment system you demonstrated would solve several problems our engineering corps has been working on. Would it be possible to examine an intact example?" Captain Park's face appeared on the communication screen again, unbidden. He looked slightly embarrassed. "Grand Admiral, I apologize for the enthusiasm of our scientific community. Your weapons demonstration was indeed impressive from a technical standpoint. However, I have been asked to clarify something about human psychology that may help explain our reaction." Zixthara said nothing, simply staring at the human who had somehow turned his ultimate show of force into an academic presentation. "Humans are what xenobiologists classify as persistence predators," Park explained. "We evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us. Our planet has extreme weather, aggressive fauna, diseases that adapt faster than most species can handle, and natural disasters that regularly reshape entire continents." Images appeared showing Earth, massive storms that could flatten cities, volcanoes that blocked out the sun, earthquakes that tore the ground apart, floods that consumed entire regions. It was a violent, dangerous world. To survive on Earth, humans developed a specific psychological trait, Park continued. "We view obstacles and dangers not as reasons to give up, but as problems to solve. When we see something powerful or dangerous, our instinct is not to run away. Our instinct is to understand it, figure out how it works, and find a way to overcome it." More images showed human history. Humans climbing the tallest mountains just to prove they could. Humans diving to the deepest ocean trenches to see what was there. Humans launching themselves into space before they had proven it was safe, just to find out what would happen. "We also developed very specific threat recognition," Park said. "Things that look scary, but are performative, do not register as real threats. Real threats on Earth do not waste time trying to intimidate. A predator does not roar before it attacks. A storm does not announce itself with dramatic displays. Real danger simply acts." Zixthara felt something cold settling in his chest. "You are saying that our demonstrations prove we are not a real threat?" "I am saying that your demonstrations prove you are trying to avoid actual conflict," Park replied carefully. "Species that truly intend to destroy others do not spend time showing off their weapons. They simply use them. Your elaborate displays tell us that you would prefer submission without battle, which means you view battle as costly, even for you." The Peltharian advisor was nodding slowly. "He is correct, Admiral. Our entire protocol is designed to avoid actual combat, because combat is expensive and risky, even for us. We have never encountered a species that could read that intent from our actions. Furthermore," Park continued, "humans have been the apex predator on our world for hundreds of thousands of years. We are familiar with being the most dangerous thing in our environment. Impressive displays of power do not trigger fear in us. They trigger analysis and planning. We see your weapons and immediately begin calculating how to counter them, not how to surrender to them. Another human transmission was intercepted. This one, from a military strategic planning session. Human officers were calmly discussing tactics for fighting the hegemony fleet if it came to battle. They were not discussing how to survive or escape. They were discussing how to win. The siege cannons have a charge time of approximately 40 seconds based on the power readings, one human analyst was saying. That is enough time to close distance and target the weapons arrays directly. The antimatter torpedoes are powerful but slow. Point defense systems should be able to intercept most of them if we maintain proper spacing. The quantum destabilizers are the real threat, another voice added. But they seem to require multiple ships to fire simultaneously to create the cascade effect. If we can disrupt their formation, we reduce their effectiveness significantly. Zixthara realized with growing horror that the humans were not impressed by hegemony power. They were studying it for weaknesses. While his fleet was trying to inspire fear, the humans were preparing for war with the calm professionalism of experienced soldiers. Captain Park, Zixthara said slowly, are you telling me that nothing we have shown you has caused fear? Park considered the question carefully. Your technology is impressive, Grand Admiral. Your weapons are powerful. Your fleet is large. But no, they have not caused fear. If you wanted to destroy us, you would have attacked already. Instead, you are talking, which means you believe we have value alive. That gives us negotiating position, not reasons to be afraid. The communication ended, and Zixthara stood in silence on his bridge, trying to understand how 50,000 years of perfected intimidation had completely failed against a species that had barely left its own star system. The tension between the hegemony fleet and the human ships had reached a strange stalemate. Grand Admiral Zixthara was preparing to make a decision he had never needed to make before, whether to actually attack a species that refused to be intimidated. It would be costly, messy, and would undermine the entire foundation of hegemony expansion strategy. If word spread that intimidation had failed, other species might find courage to resist. Before he could give any orders, every sensor on every ship in both fleets suddenly screamed warnings simultaneously. Admiral, his sensor officer shouted, all four of his arms working frantically across his console. Dark space rupture detected. Multiple signatures emerging at the system's edge. The main view screen shifted to show the source of the disturbance. Space itself was tearing open. Massive wounds in reality through which something ancient and terrible was emerging. Zixthara felt his blood turn cold. He recognized those signatures. Every spacefaring species that had survived long enough learned to recognize them. Zilthok, he whispered. The Zilthok were the nightmare that haunted every species in the galaxy. They were not a civilization. They were a force of nature. A harvest that swept through populated space every few centuries. Their ships were not built. They were grown. Massive biological constructs that fed on intelligent life itself. Where the hegemony killed to conquer, the Zilthok consumed to survive. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply harvested entire regions of space, feeding on populations until nothing remained but empty worlds. The Zilthok fleet that emerged from dark space was smaller than the assembled hegemony armada. But size meant nothing against them. Their ships looked like massive organisms, all twisted organic shapes and pulsing biological systems. They had no decorations, no intimidation displays, no cultural elements at all. They were pure, predatory efficiency. All ships, defensive formation. Zixthara commanded, his voice tight with fear that was very real. Prepare to retreat to minimum safe distance. Across the hegemony fleet, panic spread. This was not a species they had come to intimidate. This was the predator that even predators feared. Ships began breaking formation, preparing to flee to the edge of the system where they could safely jump to faster than light speeds. On the human ships, the reaction was entirely different. Captain Park's voice cut through the communication channels with sharp authority. All human vessels. Combat formation Delta. Weapons to full power. Someone get me tactical data on those ships immediately. Zixthara watched in disbelief as the human fleet, instead of fleeing, tightened their formations and moved forward. The casual, amused attitude that had frustrated him for hours was completely gone. The human ships moved with military precision, taking up positions between the Xilthok and the hegemony fleet. Captain Park, Zixthara transmitted, you do not understand what you face. The Xilthok cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be intimidated. They consume entire civilizations. Your only chance is to flee. Park's face appeared on screen, and Zixthara saw something that chilled him more than the Xilthok arrival. The human was not smiling anymore. His expression was cold, focused, and utterly without fear or amusement. We know what they are, Admiral, Park said quietly. We have encountered their scout ships before, 3 years ago on the edge of our space. They tried to harvest one of our colony worlds. We killed them all. That is impossible, Zixthara said. No species fights the Xilthok successfully. We are not most species, Park replied. All hegemony ships. We are transmitting tactical data now. Their biological hulls are resistant to energy weapons, but vulnerable to kinetic impact. Their regeneration cores are located here, here, and here. Targeting data flooded the hegemony communication networks. If you want to survive this, you follow our lead. The Xilthok fleet began moving forward, their ships pulsing with sickening organic rhythm. They had detected the concentration of intelligent life in the system and were moving to harvest it. To them, it did not matter that some ships were human and some were hegemony. All were food. Admiral, his tactical officer said urgently, the human ships are moving to intercept. They are placing themselves between us and the Xilthok. Zixthara could not process what he was seeing. The prey species, the ones they had come to intimidate into submission, were positioning themselves to protect the hegemony fleet. It violated everything he understood about galactic politics and species interaction. The Xilthok opened fire first. Massive bioplasma weapons that could melt through conventional shielding lanced out toward the human ships. The humans did not even try to dodge. Their shields absorbed the impact, flaring bright, and they returned fire immediately. Human weapons were different from hegemony technology. Where the hegemony used sophisticated energy weapons and exotic matter warheads, human weapons were brutally simple. Mass accelerators that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missiles with overwhelming kinetic energy. Focused explosives designed to shatter rather than disintegrate. The first Xilthok ship that took a direct hit from a human mass accelerator did not explode or disintegrate. It cracked. The biological hull, designed to regenerate from energy damage, could not heal from the massive physical trauma of having a projectile tear through its entire structure. They know how to fight them, Zixthara's tactical officer said with wonder. The humans actually know how to kill Xilthok. Park's voice came through on an open channel, broadcasting to all ships in both fleets. His tone was clipped and professional. The voice of someone who had done this before. Human fleet, pattern gamma. Hegemony ships, if you are going to fight, focus your fire on targets we have already damaged. Do not waste energy trying to punch through fresh hulls. Aim for the organic seams we are opening. One of Zixthara's junior officers looked at him with desperate hope. Admiral? Orders? Zixthara made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. All ships, follow human tactical commands. Focus fire as they direct. We fight together, or we die together. The hegemony fleet moved into formation alongside the human ships. It was awkward and improvised. Two military forces that had never worked together, trying to coordinate in the middle of a battle. But the humans adapted quickly, adjusting their tactics to account for hegemony capabilities. A Xilthok harvester ship moved toward one of the hegemony dreadnoughts, its biological tendrils extending to begin the consumption process. Before it could make contact, 3 human ships intercepted it, their weapons tearing into the organic hull with calculated brutality. Hegemony Dreadnought Valor's call, "Pull back and recharge your shields," Park transmitted. "We have got this one." Zixthara watched as the humans fought with a style he had never seen before. They were not trying to win elegantly or efficiently. They were trying to kill, pure and simple. Their ships took damage that would make other species retreat, but they kept fighting. When shields failed, they kept firing. When hulls were breached, they rerouted power and continued the attack. One human ship, its entire port side torn open by bioplasma fire, deliberately rammed a Zilthok harvester. The collision destroyed both ships, but it also disrupted the Zilthok formation long enough for other human vessels to exploit the opening. "Captain Park's ship is taking heavy damage," a hegemony officer reported. "Their shields are down to 15%. Zixthara looked at the tactical display. Park's vessel, the diplomatic ship that had started this entire encounter, was positioned at the most dangerous point in the battle. It was drawing fire from multiple Zilthok ships to protect a damaged hegemony cruiser that was trying to retreat. "All ships in range," Zixthara commanded. "Focus fire on the Zilthok, targeting Captain Park." Now, the hegemony fleet responded immediately. Dozens of ships turned their weapons on the Zilthok vessels threatening the human captain. Energy beams and matter torpedoes hammered into targets that human kinetic weapons had already wounded. The combined fire was devastating. The Zilthok, facing unexpected resistance and losing ships faster than they could harvest new resources, began to retreat. Their biological vessels pulled back toward the dark space ruptures they had emerged from, withdrawing to find easier prey elsewhere. As the last Zilthok ship disappeared into dark space, an exhausted silence fell over both fleets. Human ships were heavily damaged. Several completely destroyed. But they had held the line, and more importantly, they had protected the hegemony fleet that had come to intimidate them. Zixthara opened a channel to Captain Park. The human appeared on screen, his uniform torn, and his face covered in soot from internal fires. His ship's bridge was a disaster, with exposed wiring and damaged consoles visible behind him. "Captain Park," Zixthara said slowly, "you positioned your ships to protect us. Why?" Park looked tired, but his eyes were steady. "Because the Zilthok were the real threat, Admiral. You are just trying to expand your territory and maintain control. That is politics. The Zilthok consume entire civilizations. That is genocide. We know the difference. Your species fights very differently than we expected," Zixthara admitted. "You saw us laugh at your intimidation and thought we could not be dangerous," Park said. "But humans learned a long time ago that the things trying to look scary, usually, are not the real threat. The Zilthok do not bother with displays, or warnings, or psychological warfare. They just attack. That is what real danger looks like. That is when we stop laughing." Human ships were conducting repairs while hegemony vessels stood by, uncertain of what would happen next. The intimidation protocol had failed completely, but something far more significant had replaced it. Respect earned through shared combat. Grand Admiral Zixthara sat in his command chair, reviewing the battle recordings for the 3rd time. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare and human nature. The humans had not just fought effectively. They had fought with a brutality and determination that went beyond military necessity. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their ships were damaged, they used those damaged ships as weapons. When faced with impossible odds, they adapted and pushed forward. But it was not mindless aggression. Every move had been calculated. Every sacrifice had served a purpose. The humans fought like they had done this before, many times, against enemies far worse than a hegemony intimidation fleet. "Admiral," his xenocultural advisor said quietly, "I have completed a deeper analysis of human military history. I think you should see this." I. The Peltharian scholar displayed data that painted a disturbing picture of humanity. Their entire evolutionary history was warfare. Not just species against species, but humans against their own planet, against each other, against every obstacle they encountered. Humans have been at war for their entire recorded history, the advisor explained. Not occasional wars like most species, but constant, continuous conflict. They have fought each other, their environment, diseases, predators, and now other species. War is not an aberration for them. It is their natural state. Zixthara watched recordings of human history. Empires rising and falling. Technologies developed specifically to kill more efficiently. Entire philosophies built around the concept of organized violence. Even their entertainment and art were filled with conflict and combat. But they also cooperate, the advisor continued. That is the truly dangerous part. Humans are simultaneously highly competitive and highly cooperative. They can fight each other viciously and then unite instantly against an external threat. They have what they call armies, massive organizations built entirely around the concept of coordinated violence. Most species that reach space travel have moved beyond such things, Zixthara said. Exactly. Most species develop cooperation first, then technology. Humans develop technology to make their warfare more effective, and then use that warfare capability to reach space. They are an apex predator species that never stopped being predators even as they gained intelligence. Captain Park's face appeared on the communication screen, interrupting the analysis. He looked slightly better than before. His uniform changed, and the soot washed from his face. But his expression remained serious. Grand Admiral, we need to talk about what happens next. Zixthara straightened in his chair. I agree. The original purpose of my visit here has become complicated. That is one way to put it, Park said with a slight smile that did not reach his eyes. You came to intimidate us into submission. We laughed at you. Then, we fought beside you. I suspect this is not how these situations usually proceed. It is not, Zixthara admitted. I will be honest with you, Captain Park. I do not know what to do now. My protocol has failed, but I cannot simply leave. The Hegemony Council will expect results. Park nodded. Then let me help you understand something about humans that your protocol did not account for. We laughed at your intimidation display, not because we thought you were weak. We laughed because your methods were ineffective against our psychology. I understand that now, Zixthara said. But you do not understand why, Park continued. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years as hunter-gatherers on a death world. We learned to recognize real threats versus performance threats. Real predators do not roar before they attack. Real danger does not announce itself. Your display told us you were not an immediate threat, which made us relax. And the Zilthok? Zixthara asked. The Zilthok are a real threat. They do not negotiate. They do not intimidate. They consume. When we encountered their scouts 3 years ago, they attacked our colony without warning. They killed 80,000 people before we could respond. We learned to fight them because we had no choice. Park's expression became harder. We tracked those scouts back to their staging area and destroyed it. We hunted down every Zilthok ship in that region of space and killed them all. Not because we wanted to, but because we understood that letting them escape meant they would return to harvest more of our people. That level of violence against the Zilthok is unprecedented, Zixthara said quietly. Is it? Or is it just that most species do not have experience being the most dangerous thing in their environment? Park leaned forward. Admiral, let me tell you what humans are. We are persistence predators who evolved to hunt prey to exhaustion across vast distances. We are pack hunters who learned to coordinate complex strategies. We are tool users who developed weapons before we developed agriculture. And most importantly, we are survivors who lived through countless near extinctions and kept going. He gestured to the damaged human ships visible on the display. You saw us fight the Zilthok. That is what humans look like when we stop being amused and start being dangerous. We do not fight to look impressive. We do not fight for glory or honor. We fight to win. And we keep fighting until either we win or we are dead. Zixthara felt a chill run through him. You are saying that your species is naturally violent. Vix. No. Park said firmly. I am saying that we are naturally determined. Violence is just one tool we use when necessary. But here is what you need to understand about humans. We prefer cooperation to conflict. We would rather build than destroy. We choose peace when we can. But, Zixthara prompted, hearing the unspoken word, but when peace is not an option. When we are threatened, or when those under our protection are in danger, we are very, very good at violence. Because we have practiced it for our entire existence as a species. Park stood up, his posture formal. So here is humanity's answer to your ultimatum, Grand Admiral. We will not submit to the hegemony. We will not accept your authority over our worlds. But we are also willing to establish diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. Today proved that we can fight together effectively. When necessary, the Council will not accept that. Zixthara said, though his voice lacked conviction. The Council will accept whatever you tell them, Park replied. You are the Grand Admiral. You have the authority to negotiate terms, and I think if you are honest with yourself, you know that trying to conquer humanity through force would be far more costly than establishing us as allies. Zixthara considered this. He thought about the battle, about how human ships had positioned themselves to protect hegemony vessels, even after being threatened with extinction. He thought about the cold efficiency with which they fought the Zilthok, and the disturbing realization that if humans decided to fight the hegemony with that same determination, it would be a devastating conflict for both sides. What you are proposing is unprecedented, he said finally. No species has ever refused the hegemony and remained independent. Then we will be the first, Park said simply. Admiral, you came here with weapons meant to intimidate. You showed us power designed to make us afraid. But humans do not fear power. We respect capability when it is proven through action, not through display. And we proved our capability today, Zixthara said slowly, understanding dawning. You did. You fought well beside us. Your weapons, while designed more for show than efficiency, were still effective when properly deployed. Your crew adapted quickly to a tactical situation they were not prepared for. You have earned respect through your actions. Park smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. The difference is that respect leads to cooperation. Fear leads to resentment and eventual rebellion. You cannot maintain an empire of thousands of species through intimidation alone. Eventually, someone will resist. And if your protocol fails, you have no backup plan. You are suggesting we change our entire expansion strategy, Zixthara said. I am suggesting that you already have, at least for humanity. We will not submit, but we will work with you. We will share technology, coordinate defense, engage in trade, and help protect hegemony space from threats like the Zilthok. But we do so as equals, not as subjects. Zixthara made a decision that would probably end his military career, but might save countless lives. I will present your terms to the Council as a new model for hegemony expansion. Species that prove themselves capable of contributing to mutual defense will be offered partnership rather than submission. They might not accept it, Park warned. They might not. But after today, I understand something important. Humanity is not going to be the last species that your intimidation fails against. Your psychological makeup is unusual, but not unique. Eventually, the hegemony will encounter another species that does not respond to fear the way we expect. Better to have a diplomatic alternative ready than to stumble into a war we are not prepared for. That is wisdom, Admiral, Park said. As Zixthara prepared to leave, his communication officer spoke up one last time. Admiral, one of our intelligence analysts has a question about human culture that is bothering him. What is it, sir? If humans find our intimidation displays amusing because they look like they're Halloween decorations, and Halloween is a celebration where they seek out scary things for entertainment, does that mean humans were actually enjoying being threatened? There was a long pause. Then, from the human ships, they heard the sound that had started this entire strange encounter. Captain Park was laughing again. "Admiral," Park said when he could speak, "I want to be clear about something. We were not laughing because we enjoyed being threatened. We were laughing because your threat was not threatening. It was the galactic equivalent of someone jumping out and yelling boo when we can see their shadow. It is funny because it is trying so hard to be scary and missing completely. So if we had simply attacked without warning, without the display?" Zixthara asked. Park's laughter stopped. His expression became serious again. "Then we would not have had time to laugh. We would have been too busy fighting. And that, Admiral, is exactly my point. Things that are actually dangerous do not need to announce themselves. They just act." The human ships began moving toward the edge of the system, preparing to return to Earth space. The hegemony fleet watched them go, no longer certain whether humanity was the prey species they had come to intimidate or the predator they should have been negotiating with from the start. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, one young officer turned to his commander. "Admiral, what do we tell the Council about what happened here?" Zixthara watched the human ships disappear into faster-than-light travel, thinking about species that turned fear into entertainment, that fought with brutal efficiency when needed, and that somehow managed to be both amusing and terrifying depending on the situation. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We encountered a species that does not respond to intimidation. We attempted a show of force. They laughed at us. Then we fought together against a real threat, and they proved to be the most effective combat species we have ever encountered. We also tell them that humanity has declined to join the hegemony, but is open to alliance as equals. And if the Council orders us to attack them anyway?" the officer asked quietly. Zixthara remembered human ships positioning themselves to protect hegemony vessels. He remembered the cold efficiency of human warfare. He remembered Captain Park's words about humans fighting until they won or died. "Then we tell the Council that such an attack would be costly, protracted, and ultimately pointless. Because humans do not surrender, they do not intimidate, and they apparently find war to be just another problem to solve. Better to have them as allies than as enemies." As his ship prepared to jump back to hegemony space, Zixthara looked one last time at the recordings of the human Halloween celebration. Children dressed as monsters, laughing and playing. Adults decorating their homes with skulls and death imagery for fun. He finally understood. Humans had domesticated fear itself. They had taken the thing that controlled every other species and turned it into entertainment. That was not a species you could intimidate. That was a species you had to respect. And respect, Zixthara was learning, was far more valuable than fear anyway.
The morning sun rose over New Hebron just like it had for the past 20 years. Children walked to school while their parents headed to work in the farming districts. The colony had grown from a small settlement to a thriving city of 2.3 million people. Nobody expected this day would be their last. Commander Sarah Chen sat in the captain's chair of the patrol ship Defiant, drinking her morning coffee. Her crew was running routine checks near the edge of the system. It was boring work, but somebody had to do it. Earth had been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years now, and most aliens still treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. Sarah did not mind too much. Humanity was new to space, and the other races had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The Krell Dominion alone had controlled their sector for over 3,000 years. They were reptilian creatures, tall and covered in dark scales with eyes that never seemed to blink. They made Sarah uncomfortable, but the Council promised peace between all member species. That promise died at 9:37 in the morning. The sensor officer shouted a warning. Sarah spilled her coffee as she jumped up. On the main screen, dozens of ships appeared from faster-than-light travel. They were Krell vessels, their dark hulls shaped like daggers pointed at New Hebron. Sarah opened communications immediately. "This is Commander Chen of the United Earth ship Defiant. You are entering human space without authorization. Please state your intentions. There was no response. The Krell ships moved into position above New Hebron. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She knew what was coming, but her mind refused to accept it. Get us closer, she ordered. Maximum speed. And send a priority alert to Earth. The Defiant raced toward the planet, but it was too small and too far away. Sarah watched helplessly as the Krell ships began firing. Bright beams of energy struck the surface. Cities vanished in flashes of light. The planet's atmosphere caught fire in places. Within minutes, the entire surface was burning. Sarah's hands gripped the armrests of her chair so hard they hurt. Her crew sat in stunned silence. Some were crying. Others looked like they might be sick. 2.3 million people had just died, and they could do nothing but watch. The Krell ships finished their work and began turning toward the Defiant. Sarah's tactical officer reported that they were being targeted. 3 Krell cruisers broke formation and headed their way. Prepare for emergency jump, Sarah said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, hollow and distant. Get us out of here, now. The Defiant's faster-than-light drive activated just as the Krell fired. The ship shook violently and alarms blared throughout the bridge. They had taken a glancing hit, but they had escaped. Sarah ordered the crew to record everything their sensors had captured. The galaxy needed to see what the Krell had done. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. Sarah spent most of that time in her quarters, staring at the walls. She had joined the fleet to explore the galaxy and meet new species. She had not signed up to watch millions of people die. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw New Hebron burning. When the Defiant reached Earth, Sarah was summoned immediately to United Earth Government headquarters. She stood before the Council of Nations and played the recording. The chamber fell silent as the leaders of Earth watched New Hebron die. Some looked away. Others wept openly. When the recording ended, the room erupted in shouting. This is an act of war, the Chinese representative declared. We must respond with force, agreed the American president. Against the Krell Dominion? The European Union chancellor shook her head. They have thousands of ships. We have barely 200. This would be suicide. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, reported from the council station. The council had held an emergency session. The Krell representative had called the attack a population management action in response to human expansion into contested space. New Hebron had been in human territory for 2 decades, but the Krell did not care about such details. The council had voted to express their deep concerns about the situation. They encouraged both sides to pursue diplomatic solutions. Not a single species voted to condemn the Krell or sanction them. The Krell Dominion was too powerful, and humanity was too new and too weak to matter. Ambassador Tanaka's message ended with her own opinion. We are alone in this. The council will not help us. If we want justice for New Hebron, we must take it ourselves. Sarah was promoted to captain and given command of a new ship, the Vengeance. She did not feel honored. She felt angry. The United Earth government was moving into what they called total mobilization. Every factory was being retooled. Every shipyard was working around the clock. Retired military officers were being called back to service. Admiral Marcus Webb addressed the fleet in a message broadcast to every military installation. He was an old man with silver hair and tired eyes, but his voice was strong. For 15 years, we tried to be good neighbors in the galaxy. We followed the rules. We sought peace. The Krell have shown us that peace is only possible when you are strong enough to defend it. We were not strong enough. Our people on New Hebron paid the price for our weakness. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was hard as steel. That changes now. We will build ships. We will train soldiers. And we will show the Krell Dominion and every other species in this galaxy that humanity will not roll over and die. Because someone decided, we do not matter. The Krell struck first, but we will strike last. Sarah watched the speech from the bridge of the Vengeance. Around her, the crew nodded in agreement. These men and women had all lost someone on New Hebron. Friends, family, loved ones. They wanted the same thing Sarah wanted. They wanted the Krell to pay. But Sarah also felt something else beneath her anger. She felt fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of what humanity might become. Earth had spent centuries trying to leave behind its violent past. Wars had nearly destroyed the planet multiple times before humanity finally learned to work together. Now they were going back to war. And Sarah wondered if they would be able to stop once they started. She pushed those thoughts aside. New Hebron needed to be avenged. The Krell needed to learn that humans were not prey animals to be culled when convenient. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, humanity would make sure this never happened again. The Vengeance finished its shakedown cruise and was declared ready for combat. Sarah received her orders. She would lead a small fleet to the Krell border and begin what Admiral Webb called aggressive reconnaissance. Sarah knew what that really meant. They were going hunting. As the Vengeance jumped into faster-than-light travel, Sarah looked at the empty space where New Hebron had been. The colony was gone, but its memory would live on. Every human in the fleet carried that memory now. It drove them forward, pushed them past their fear, and gave them purpose. The Krell had struck first. They had done so thinking humanity would beg for mercy or hide behind the useless Galactic Council. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Humanity was coming, and they were bringing the one thing the peaceful galaxy had forgotten. They were bringing war. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and studied the tactical map. 6 other ships floated nearby in the darkness of space. They were all that remained of what had once been called the Third Exploratory Fleet. Now they had a new name. Admiral Webb had called them the Ghost Fleet, and their mission was simple: make the Krell pay. The target was a supply station on the edge of Krell territory. Intelligence reported it was lightly defended. Only 2 patrol ships and a handful of automated defenses. Sarah knew the real challenge would be getting in and out before reinforcements arrived. "All ships report ready," her first officer said. Sarah nodded. "Begin the attack." The Ghost Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on top of the station. The Krell were caught completely off guard. Human ships opened fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space. Railguns fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. The station's shields collapsed within seconds. The 2 Krell patrol ships tried to fight back, but they were not ready. One exploded when a missile struck its reactor. The other tried to run. Sarah ordered 2 ships to pursue it. The Krell ship was faster, but human missiles were relentless. It died 5 minutes later. The station itself was evacuated. Sarah could see escape pods fleeing in all directions. She let them go. Her orders were to destroy military targets, not murder civilians. The Vengeance fired a spread of missiles into the station's main structure. Secondary explosions rippled through the facility. Within minutes, it was nothing but debris. "Jump us out," Sarah ordered, before their friends show up. The Ghost Fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel. Behind them, the Krell supply station burned. It was a small victory, but it was a start. Back on Earth, the factories worked day and night. Humanity was building ships at a rate that shocked the galaxy. The designs were crude compared to Krell technology. Human ships had thicker armor but weaker shields. They carried old-fashioned kinetic weapons alongside modern energy guns. Some alien observers called them primitive. Others called them brutal. What nobody expected was how many ships humanity could build. The Krell had been building their fleet for thousands of years. They had hundreds of massive cruisers and battleships, but they built them slowly, carefully, with artistic precision. Humans built their ships fast and dirty. What they lacked in elegance, they made up for in numbers. Admiral Webb explained the strategy to his officers. The Krell think war is an art form. They believe in honor and tradition. We are going to show them that war is not art. War is a job, and humans are very good at their jobs. The Ghost Fleet struck again 2 weeks later. This time they hit a mining operation in an asteroid field. The Krell defenders fought hard, but they were not prepared for human tactics. Sarah's ships hid among the asteroids, using them as cover. When Krell vessels came close, human ships would blast out of hiding and fire at point-blank range. One human destroyer took heavy damage and could not escape. The captain made a decision that would become famous throughout the fleet. Instead of surrendering or abandoning ship, he aimed his vessel at a Krell cruiser and hit maximum thrust. The destroyer crashed into the cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. The Krell were horrified. Ramming was considered the act of desperate savages. But desperate savages kept winning. The mining operation was destroyed, and the Ghost Fleet escaped once again. War Master Krellthar sat in his command chamber on the Krell homeworld and read the reports with growing anger. These humans were not fighting like civilized beings. They ambushed supply convoys. They used nuclear weapons, which most species had banned centuries ago. They employed cyber attacks to disable Krell computer systems. They even used biological weapons on one military base, releasing a virus that made the defenders too sick to fight. They are barbarians, Krelthar hissed to his advisors. They have no honor, no respect for the proper way to wage war. One brave advisor dared to speak. Perhaps, War Master, but they are winning. Krelthar struck the advisor across the face with his tail. They are winning minor skirmishes against unimportant targets. When we commit our full strength, these primitives will break like all the others. But privately, Krelthar was worried. The Krell Dominion had not fought a real war in over 500 years. Their last conflicts had been brief police actions against minor species. Those species had surrendered quickly when they saw the might of the Krell fleet. The humans should have done the same. Instead, they fought back with a ferocity that seemed insane. The Galactic Council watched the conflict with growing unease. Ambassador Tanaka attended every session and made sure humanity's voice was heard. When the Krell representative accused humans of war crimes, Tanaka had a sharp response. You destroyed an entire colony without warning. You killed 2.3 million civilians. You started this war. Now you complain that we fight back too hard? She looked around the chamber at the other species. Where were all of you when New Hebron burned? We asked for help. We asked for justice. You gave us nothing but words. So we will give you results. The smaller species in the council began to whisper among themselves. For thousands of years they had lived under the shadow of the great powers. Species like the Krell could do whatever they wanted and nobody dared to challenge them. Now humanity was challenging them, and the humans were not losing. The Nexari Collective, a species of traders and merchants, approached Ambassador Tanaka in private. They offered to share intelligence about Krell ship movements and supply routes. In exchange, they wanted human protection for their trade convoys. Tanaka agreed immediately. With Nexari intelligence, the Ghost Fleet became even more effective. Sarah's ships seemed to appear out of nowhere, strike fast and vanish before the Krell could respond. Supply lines were disrupted. Military outposts were destroyed. Krell ships began traveling in larger groups for safety, which only made them easier to track. After 6 months of raids, Admiral Webb called Sarah back to Earth. She expected to be given a new assignment or perhaps a medal. Instead, Webb showed her the plans for a massive offensive. We have been stinging them like insects, Webb said. Now it is time to show them we can bite. The Krell are planning to strike at Earth itself. We will be ready. Sarah looked at the defensive plans and felt her blood run cold. The Krell were committing 300 ships to the attack. It was the largest fleet they had assembled in centuries. If they reached Earth, the war would be over. What do we have to stop them? Sarah asked. Webb smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Everything. Humanity had not been idle. The moon had been transformed into a massive weapons platform. Thousands of railguns pointed toward space. Missile silos covered the surface. Automated defense platforms orbited Earth in layers. And hidden in the asteroid belt, humanity had built something special, something the Krell would never expect. They think we are primitives, Webb said. They think we only know how to fight dirty and run away. They are about to learn that primitives can be very creative when their home is threatened. Sarah received a new assignment. She would command a squadron of fast attack ships during the coming battle. Her job was to harass the Krell fleet and draw them into the kill zone. It was dangerous work, but Sarah did not hesitate. New Hebron still burned in her memory. The Krell fleet began moving toward Earth. War Master Krelthar led them personally aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. He was confident. 300 ships would be more than enough to crush the human homeworld. After Earth fell, the rest of humanity would surrender. Then the Krell could return to their proper place as the dominant power in the sector. As the Krell fleet approached the Sol system, Krelthar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had fought well for primitives, but their luck had run out. Soon this annoying war would be over. He had no idea how wrong he was. The Krell fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. 300 warships filled the space with their dark presence. War Master Krelthar stood on the bridge of his flagship and gazed at the small blue planet in the distance. Earth looked peaceful and vulnerable. He would enjoy watching it burn. All ships advance in formation, he commanded. Target the moon first, destroy their military installations, then we will move on to the planet itself. The Krell fleet began its approach. They moved slowly and carefully, maintaining perfect formation. This was how civilized species fought wars. With discipline, with honor, with overwhelming force that left no doubt about the outcome. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as the enemy fleet advanced. Her squadron was positioned behind a cluster of satellites hidden from Krell sensors. All across the solar system, human forces waited in similar ambush positions. "Remember," Admiral Webb's voice came through on the command channel. "Let them get close. Let them think they are winning. Then we show them what humanity can do." The Krell fleet passed the orbit of Mars without incident. Krelthar nodded with satisfaction. The humans were not even trying to slow them down. Perhaps they had finally realized how hopeless their situation was. As the fleet crossed into the inner system, the first attacks came. Small groups of human ships darted out from behind asteroids and moons, fired missiles and retreated at maximum speed. The attacks were weak and poorly coordinated. Krelthar allowed his ships to return fire, destroying a few of the attackers. "Primitives," he muttered. "They send their young to die in futile gestures." What Krelthar did not know was that those attacks were not meant to hurt his fleet. They were meant to position it. Each time the Krell ships turned to engage the human attackers, they moved a little off course. Slowly, carefully, the humans were herding 300 Krell warships exactly where they wanted them. The Krell fleet reached the moon. Krelthar gave the order to begin bombardment. His ships opened fire on the lunar surface. Energy beams struck the gray rock and exploded in massive clouds of dust. Several installations were destroyed in the first volley. Then the moon fired back. Thousands of railguns opened up at once. Unlike energy weapons that could be partially blocked by shields, these guns fired solid metal slugs at incredible velocity. The projectiles punched through Krell shields like they were not even there. Ships rocked under the impact. Armor crumpled. Several cruisers lost power and began drifting. "Evasive action," Krelthar roared. "Return fire on those gun positions." But the guns were buried deep in the lunar rock. The Krell could destroy the surface installations, but the main weapons were untouchable. More and more railgun rounds slammed into the fleet. A Krell battleship exploded when a slug penetrated straight through to its reactor core. Then the missiles launched. Thousands of them rose from hidden silos across the lunar surface. They filled the space between Earth and Moon with contrails and fire. Krell point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Missiles struck ship after ship. "This is impossible," one of Krelthar's officers cried. "Intelligence said the humans only had a few hundred missiles." Intelligence was wrong, Krelthar growled. He was beginning to understand something terrible. The humans had been preparing for this. All their hit-and-run attacks, all their desperate tactics had been buying time for this moment. Sarah's squadron came screaming out of hiding. The Vengeance led a dozen ships in a high-speed attack run straight through the Krell formation. They fired everything they had, focusing on ships that were already damaged. One Krell cruiser, its shields down and armor breached, took a direct hit from the Vengeance's main guns. It broke in half. "All ships scatter," Sarah ordered. Her squadron split in 12 different directions. The Krell tried to track them, but the human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They had been designed specifically for this kind of fighting. Then the real surprise came. Hidden throughout the debris field of old satellites and space junk, thousands of automated drones activated. They were simple machines, nothing but a thruster and a nuclear warhead. They did not even have weapons targeting systems. They just flew toward the nearest large object and detonated. Krelthar watched in horror as suicide drones slammed into his ships. Each explosion was small, but there were hundreds of them. Shields flickered and failed under the constant assault. Smaller vessels were simply vaporized. Larger ships took critical damage. These barbarians. Krelthar slammed his fist on the command console. "They use nuclear weapons like toys. They have no honor." His tactical officer interrupted. "Warmaster, we have lost 40 ships. Many more are damaged. We should retreat and regroup." "Retreat?" Krelthar's eyes blazed with fury. "The Krell Dominion does not retreat. We will push through their defenses and complete our mission." But the defensive platforms were just getting started. All around Earth, hidden installations revealed themselves. Massive laser arrays fired. Particle beam weapons cut through the void. And from the asteroid belt came dozens of human heavy cruisers that had been waiting there for weeks. The Battle of Terra, as it would be called in history books, lasted 14 hours. The Krell fought with desperation as they realized they were not winning. Ships that could no longer fight rammed into the defensive platforms. Damaged vessels tried to reach Earth's surface for one last attack, but humanity had prepared for everything. When a Krell destroyer broke through the defenses and headed for a major city, 3 human frigates intercepted it. They were too small to destroy the destroyer, but they did not need to. All 3 frigates rammed the larger ship at full speed. The destroyer was knocked off course and exploded harmlessly in the atmosphere. Admiral Webb watched from the command center deep beneath Earth's surface. Each human ship that died hurt his heart, but he could not deny the effectiveness of their sacrifice. The Krell had never faced an enemy willing to die to protect their home. They did not know how to fight against that kind of determination. Warmaster Krellthar's flagship was hit by a railgun round that tore through the engine section. The Eternal Dominance went dark, its power systems failing. Krellthar tried to order a retreat, but his communications were down. Around him, the remains of his fleet were already running, those ships that could still move. Of the 300 ships that attacked Earth, only 73 escaped. The rest were destroyed or crippled. Sarah's squadron hunted down several fleeing vessels, destroying them before they could jump to faster-than-light speed. When the last Krell ship vanished into the darkness, a cheer went up across the human fleet. But there was no celebration on Earth. The victory had cost 200 human ships and over 50,000 lives. The moon's surface was scarred with craters. Several orbital platforms had been destroyed, and Krellthar's flagship still floated in space, its crew trapped inside. Admiral Webb made a decision that would shock the galaxy. He ordered Krellthar taken alive. Human Marines boarded the crippled flagship and fought their way to the bridge. The Warmaster tried to fight, but he was old and wounded. The Marines stunned him and brought him back to Earth in chains. Ambassador Tanaka immediately called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. When the council assembled, she stood before them with Warmaster Krellthar in a containment field beside her. "This is the leader who ordered the destruction of New Hebron," Tanaka said. Her voice was cold and hard. "This is the commander who brought 300 ships to destroy Earth. We captured him. We could have killed him, but we did not. Do you know why?" The council chamber was silent. Every species representative stared at the captive Krell with a mixture of shock and disbelief. The Krell were supposed to be unstoppable, yet here their greatest warmaster stood in chains, defeated by the species everyone had called primitive. "We spared him because we are not monsters," Tanaka continued. "We fight to defend ourselves, not to commit genocide. But make no mistake, the Krell started this war. They thought we would be easy victims. They were wrong." She activated a holographic display. It showed footage from the battle. The council watched as the Krell fleet was torn apart. They saw human ships sacrifice themselves. They saw the brutal efficiency of humanity's defenses. Many representatives looked away, unable to watch the carnage. "You call us barbaric," Tanaka said. "You call us primitive. But when the Krell came to destroy us, where were you? You did nothing. You said nothing. So we did what we had to do. We survived. And now the Krell will learn what it means to lose." 3 council species stood up and demanded that humanity be punished for excessive force. But for the first time in thousands of years, the smaller species found their voices. Representatives from a dozen minor civilizations spoke in support of humanity. They talked about living in fear of the great powers. They spoke of injustices they had suffered in silence. The vote was close, but the council did not condemn humanity. Instead, they agreed to establish tribunals for war crimes. Krellthar would be the first to stand trial. The Krell Dominion's allies quietly began distancing themselves from the conflict. Sarah Chen sat in her quarters aboard the Vengeance and watched the news broadcasts. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had proven that the old powers could be challenged. But Sarah felt no joy. She thought of all the people the Krell Dominion was in chaos. After the disaster at Earth, their military command structure had collapsed. Warmaster Krellthar was in human custody. More than 200 ships and their crews were lost. For a civilization that had not known defeat in 1,000 years, the shock was overwhelming. Admiral Marcus Webb stood before the United Earth government and presented his plan. It was called Operation Hellstorm, and it was designed to do one thing, and the Krell's ability to make war forever. "We cannot stop now," Webb said. "If we show weakness, the Krell will rebuild and attack again in 10 years or 20 or 50. We must make sure they never threaten anyone again." Some government representatives argued against the plan. They said humanity had already proven their point. The Krell had been defeated. Why continue the killing? But others remembered New Hebron. They remembered 2.3 million people who never got a chance to defend themselves. The vote was close, but Operation Hellstorm was approved. The human fleet, reinforced with newly built ships from the factories on Mars and Luna, prepared for the largest offensive in human history. They were not going to invade Krell territory. They were going to destroy every military installation the Krell had. Captain Sarah Chen was given command of the Ghost Fleet once again. Her mission was the most dangerous of all. She would lead a strike directly at the Krell homeworld, not to attack the planet but to disable their orbital defenses. If she succeeded, the Krell would have no choice but to surrender. Sarah gathered her squadron commanders in the briefing room. They all looked tired. They had been fighting for over a year now, and it showed in their faces. But their eyes still burned with determination. "This will not be easy," Sarah told them. "The Krell homeworld has defenses that make Earth's look primitive. They have been building them for 3,000 years. But they also have never been attacked. Their defenses are designed to stop an invasion fleet, not a fast strike force." She brought up a holographic map of the Krell system. "We will jump in here at the edge of their sensor range. Then we use maximum speed to reach the planet before they can organize a response. Our targets are the shield generators. Destroy those and the Krell will be defenseless." One commander raised his hand. "And if we cannot destroy them all?" Sarah looked him in the eye. "Then some of us will need to make sure they go down anyway." Everyone in the room understood what that meant. This was a one-way mission for anyone whose ship got too damaged to escape. Sarah could see the fear in their faces, but she also saw acceptance. They had all lost someone at New Hebron. If dying meant preventing another New Hebron, they would do it. The Ghost Fleet jumped into the Krell system 3 days later. 20 ships appeared out of nowhere and accelerated to maximum speed. Alarms blared across every Krell military installation. The impossible was happening. Earth was attacking them. The Krell had 36 warships in orbit around their homeworld. They scrambled to intercept the human ships. But the humans did not slow down or try to fight. They just kept accelerating, dodging return fire and launching missiles at anything that got too close. Sarah's tactical display showed multiple Krell ships on an intercept course. All ships maintain formation. Do not stop for anything. If you get hit, keep flying until you reach the target or you cannot fly anymore. The first human ship took a direct hit from a Krell battleship. Its shields collapsed and the hull was breached in a dozen places. But the captain kept the engines running. The damaged ship limped forward, trailing debris and atmosphere until it reached the nearest shield generator. Then it rammed the structure at full speed. The explosion took out the generator and the ship. 1 down. 7 more to go. Sarah's vengeance led the charge toward the main shield complex. Krell fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. Point defense guns shot down dozens, but more kept coming. The Vengeance's shields were taking heavy damage. Sarah could smell burning circuits from the overloaded systems. "Give me everything," she shouted to her engineering team. "I need full power to weapons." The Vengeance fired its main guns at the shield generator. The first shot was absorbed by the generator's own shields. The second shot cracked them. The third shot punched through and hit the main structure. The generator exploded in a ball of blue fire. 2 down, 6 to go. All across the orbital zone, human ships were fighting and dying to reach their targets. A destroyer lost its engines but continued on momentum alone, using thrusters to aim itself at a generator. A frigate, completely engulfed in flames, crashed into a defense platform and destroyed both. Another ship, its crew dead and systems failing, was remotely piloted by AI into the final approach. Sarah watched as ship after ship sacrificed itself. These were not suicide attacks born from desperation. They were calculated decisions made by people who knew what they were dying for. Every generator destroyed was one less weapon the Krell could use against others. The Krell defenders fought with equal desperation. This was their homeworld. If they failed here, everything was lost. But they had trained for battles in space, not for enemies willing to turn their ships into missiles. The human tactics were insane, but they were working. Admiral Webb watched from Earth as reports came in. The Ghost Fleet was succeeding, but the cost was terrible. Of the 20 ships that went in, only 5 were still operational. The rest were destroyed or too damaged to fight. But they had taken out 6 of the 8 shield generators. Sarah's Vengeance was one of the ships still flying. Her hull was scarred and burned. Half her crew was dead or wounded. Life support was failing in 3 sections, but her engine still worked, and she had 1 more target to hit. "All remaining ships concentrate on Generator 7, Sarah ordered. "Hit it with everything we have left." 4 human ships converged on the target. They fired every missile they had. The generator's shields held for a moment, then collapsed under the barrage. The structure itself was heavily armored, but armor could not stop a ship traveling at combat speed. The destroyer, relentless, its captain dead, and half the bridge crew injured, made the final run. Sarah watched as the ship crashed into the generator and exploded. Generator 7 went down, 1 left, but Sarah's tactical display showed bad news. Krell reinforcements were arriving from other parts of the system. In 10 minutes, the Ghost Fleet would be surrounded and destroyed. "Vengeance to all ships," Sarah broadcast. "We need to take out that last generator now. I am going in. Anyone who can still fly, follow me." 3 ships formed up behind the Vengeance. They were all damaged. They were all running on emergency power, but they were still in the fight. The small formation accelerated toward the final shield generator. Krell weapons fire filled the space around them. One ship took a direct hit and exploded instantly. Another lost half its hull but kept flying. Sarah's shields finally failed completely. Energy beams scorched the Vengeance's armor. "Sarah," her first officer said quietly, "we are not going to make it." Sarah looked at the tactical display. He was right. They would not survive long enough to destroy the generator. Unless she did something drastic. "All ships, this is Chen, break off and get out of here." "That is an order. I am finishing this run." "Captain, no," her weapons officer protested. "That is an order," Sarah repeated. "Someone needs to tell Earth what happened here, now go." The 2 remaining ships peeled away and headed for the system edge. Sarah knew some of her crew would try to stop her. She locked everyone out of the helm controls. The Vengeance was under her command alone now. She aimed the ship directly at the shield generator and pushed the engines to maximum. The Krell threw everything they had at her. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. The Vengeance shook with each hit. Whole sections of the ship went dark. The bridge caught fire. Sarah strapped herself into the captain's chair and held course. She thought about New Hebron. She thought about the millions who died that day. She thought about all the people who had died in this war, both human and Krell. All because some powerful beings had decided that weaker species did not matter. "This is for New Hebron," Sarah whispered. But at the last moment, something unexpected happened. The remaining crew, trapped in various parts of the ship, started sending her messages. They were not begging her to turn back. They were thanking her for leading them, thanking her for giving them a chance to mean something. Sarah realized she was not alone in this sacrifice. Her crew was choosing to die with her. They could have abandoned ship, but they stayed. They stayed because this mattered, because someone had to make sure the Krell never did this to anyone else. The Vengeance struck the shield generator at full velocity. The explosion was visible from the surface of the Krell homeworld. The last shield generator went offline. The Krell capital was defenseless. From orbit, Admiral Webb's fleet appeared. Dozens of human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They had been waiting for this moment. The Ghost Fleet had succeeded. Now it was time to deliver the ultimatum. Webb's message broadcast on all Krell frequencies. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Earth Fleet. Your orbital defenses are destroyed. Your warships are..." The wreckage of the Vengeance was recovered from orbit around the Krell homeworld. Most of the ship was destroyed, but they found the bridge intact. Captain Sarah Chen's body was still strapped in the captain's chair. Admiral Webb insisted on being present when they brought her home to Earth. Sarah was given a hero's funeral. Millions watched as her coffin was carried through the streets of Geneva. Flags flew at half-mast across the planet. She had become a symbol of humanity's determination and sacrifice. But to Admiral Webb, she was just another name on a list that had grown far too long. The Krell Dominion was broken into occupation zones. Human administrators worked with Krell civilians to establish a new government. All military shipyards were dismantled. The Krell fleet was reduced to a small defense force, barely enough to fight pirates. It would take them centuries to rebuild if they were ever allowed to. War Master Krellthar stood trial for war crimes at the new Galactic Court of Justice. It was a human idea, but dozens of species had supported it. For the first time in galactic history, the powerful would be held accountable for their actions against the weak. Krellthar showed no remorse. "I did what I believed was necessary for my people," he told the court. The humans were expanding too quickly. They needed to be controlled. The prosecution showed recordings from New Hebron. 2.3 million civilians dying in fire, children running from bombs, cities vanishing in flashes of light. The court chamber fell silent as the recordings played. Krelthar was found guilty of genocide and crimes against sapient life. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a neutral station. As guards led him away, he looked at the human observers. "You have won this war," he said. "But you have also become what you fought against. Warriors, killers. You will never escape that now." His words haunted many humans. They had gone to the stars seeking peace and found only war. Now they were known throughout the galaxy as the species that had defeated the Krell. But at what cost? Ambassador Yuki Tanaka addressed the Galactic Council for the final time as humanity's representative. She was being promoted to a new position, one that had been created specifically for Earth. Humanity would join the Council's Security Directorate, a reformed body designed to prevent wars before they started. "We did not want this," Tanaka told the assembled species. "We wanted to be explorers and traders. We wanted to make friends among the stars." The Krell took that dream and burned it along with New Hebron. "They forced us to remember what we are capable of when we are pushed too far." She paused and looked around the chamber. Some species met her gaze. Others looked away. "But we refused to become the next bullies. We refuse to use our strength to oppress others. Instead, we will use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Any species, large or small, that faces aggression can call on Earth for help. We will answer." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some of the great powers objected to this proposal. They saw it as humanity trying to police the galaxy. But the smaller species, those who had lived in fear for generations, stood and applauded. For them, humanity's promise meant hope. The Nexari Collective was the first to sign a mutual defense treaty with Earth. Within months, 20 other species had done the same. Humanity began building new ships not for conquest but to patrol and protect. The phrase "protected by Earth" started appearing on trade routes and colony worlds. Admiral Webb retired after the war. He had done what he set out to do. The Krell were defeated and Earth was safe. But he could not forget the faces of all the people who had died under his command. Sarah Chen, the crew of the Relentless. The pilots who rammed their ships into Krell vessels. Thousands of names on a memorial wall that seemed to grow longer every time he looked at it. At his retirement ceremony, Webb gave a short speech. "We won the war, but we must never forget what war costs. Every person who died believed they were defending something worth dying for. They were right, but I hope humanity never has to make such sacrifices again. We fought so that others would not have to. Let that be our legacy." Earth began the long process of healing. The moon's surface was scarred with craters from the Battle of Terra. They decided to leave them as they were. Future generations would see those scars and remember the price of peace. A memorial was built at the site where New Hebron once stood. 2.3 million names were carved in stone. The human fleet continued to grow, but its mission changed. Instead of preparing for the next war, it focused on exploration and defense. Human ships escorted trade convoys through dangerous space. They responded to distress calls from mining colonies. They helped smaller species build their own defenses. The galaxy was changing. The old order, where the powerful did whatever they wanted, was breaking down. Species that had been silent for thousands of years found their voices. The Galactic Council became more democratic. New rules were established to prevent conflicts. And humanity, the species everyone had called primitive, was at the center of it all. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Some of the great powers watched humanity's rise with suspicion and anger. They had lost influence and prestige. They whispered among themselves about the need to correct the situation. Humanity's allies warned Earth about these whispers, but the United Earth government was not worried. "Let them whisper," the New Earth president said. "Let them plot. But they should remember what happened to the Krell. We did not want that war. We did not start it. But we finished it. Anyone who threatens peace will learn the same lesson." 10 years after the war ended, a ceremony was held at New Hebron. The memorial was completed, and survivors from across human space came to remember. Old veterans stood in silence, looking at names they recognized. Young children asked their parents who these people were and why they died. Among the visitors was a young Krell. She had been born after the war and had grown up learning about what her people had done. She approached the memorial hesitantly, afraid of how the humans would react. An old human veteran saw her and walked over. He had lost his entire family at New Hebron. The Krell girl expected anger or hatred. Instead, the veteran just looked tired. "Why did your people attack us?" she asked quietly. The veteran was silent for a long time. Your leaders thought we were weak. They thought we would not fight back. They were wrong. He gestured to the memorial. This is the price of that mistake. Remember it. Make sure your children remember it. So it never happens again. The Krell girl nodded. She had come to New Hebron to understand. Now she did. The war had not just killed people. It had killed the innocence of two species. The humans had learned they could never let their guard down. The Krell had learned that power without wisdom leads to disaster. Back on Earth, a new generation of children were growing up. They learned about the war in school. They saw the recordings and read the accounts. But they also learned about the peace that followed. They learned that strength was not just about winning fights, but about protecting the weak. A reporter asked one of these children what she wanted to be when she grew up. She thought for a moment and said, "I want to join the fleet. Not to fight wars, but to make sure we never have to fight one again." That was humanity's new dream. They had proven they could wage war better than species with thousands of years of experience. Now they would prove they could keep the peace just as well. The galaxy had struck first, but humanity's response had been to build a future where no one would need to strike at all. On the bridge of a patrol ship far from Earth, a young officer looked out at the stars. She wore a uniform with a patch that showed Earth and the moon. Above them were the words, "Never again." It was the motto of the United Earth. Fleet, the officer thought about all the species, living under Earth's protection. She thought about the treaties and alliances that kept the peace. She thought about Captain Sarah Chen and all the others who had died so that she could stand here in safety. "Never again," she whispered to the stars. The war was over. Humanity had won. But more importantly, humanity had not forgotten why they fought. They remembered New Hebron. They remembered the cost. And they would make sure that cost meant something. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about humanity. They were not the strongest species. They were not the oldest or the wisest. But when pushed to the edge, when their homes and families were threatened, they would do whatever it took to survive. And now that the fighting was done, humanity would do whatever it took to make sure no other species had to learn that same terrible lesson. The aliens had struck first, thinking humanity would be easy prey. Instead, they woke a sleeping giant, and that giant, having proven its strength, now used that strength to guard the weak and keep the peace. That was humanity's true revenge. Not destruction, but protection. Not conquest, but justice. The Krell had tried to erase humanity from the stars. Instead, humanity had become the stars' guardians, and they would remain vigilant, forever remembering the price of peace, forever ready to defend it. The galaxy would never forget the day the aliens struck first, but more importantly, it would never forget humanity's response, not with more violence than necessary, but with exactly enough, not with cruelty, but with determination, not to dominate, but to ensure it never happened again.